or some other eyes, but I think it looks great, Peter.
And just a quick comment. One thing that there's not a lot of references in here. Um, there's some assertions that are kind of made, and there's obviously, and Russ was commenting on this, we can talk about backup and stuff like that, but when it's kind of a priority statement, we're not putting full big proposals with all the backup. I think we need to have all of that,
Mhm.
for further discussions, but a 1.5 page thing turns into 3 to 4 if we try to go all the way, just as a explanatory thing. But Jen, Russ, do you have any kind of high level comments before we kind of maybe tick through it in a little bit more detail?
I thanks, Peter. We tend to talk about what the key metrics are for a healthy community. And I think if we can somehow, and again, do not want to make this a thesis paper or dissertation by any stretch. But if there's any way that we can look at, or we as a subcommittee, look at maybe what those 3 or 4 key performance metrics are that we can actually measure, and give some indication of this is where they are now, or this is what we're seeing, and here's something that we should measure, or here's something that we already have. I keep coming back to things, as we talked at our last meeting, on key performance metrics that are happening in the school system and what they're tracking versus suicidal ideation rates versus other factors. If there are key, a couple measurable indicators that says that we're successful, we've moved the needle. I think that would be helpful if we can, instead of having maybe a more general piece, which I think is important. But I think it's also important to have those KPIs that are measurable, impactful, and show that either what we're doing is being successful, we're moving upstream and hitting it at a low cost, high valued way, as compared to a high cost and a very intensive acute care way.
I think we should have both. I think you have to have something that is very kind of succinct and basic, because there are so many people whose eyes glaze over when it, turns into numbers and gets long. And then there are the people who do actually care about, like you're saying, Russ, where it's like, this is all great, but if we don't have goals and we can't measure whether things are effective, what use is it? So I do think we need to have both.
I'm wondering if we can comment on kind of in a low-key way the need for that, and then that can be a go forward thing that we can work on, in conjunction with others, because that gets to be really subtle stuff and not done quickly. In terms of how do you select a few things. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that's incredibly important that just aren't measured, probably the most important thing. So, Russ, I wonder if we can make it as a to-do. We reference them in the document as the need for that. And then, and again, I'm just not sure it's like entirely just the commission's role to figure that stuff out. We probably need to get, you know, work the room, to get the proper inputs. Maybe that's the best way to address it, because I think it's a point well made, Russ, and I think us putting some time into it with other people is probably a really good follow on from all of this.
I tend to think too that some of the preventative pieces we've been talking so much about, those are harder to quantify, right? And so that also just becomes tricky. We can spend a lot of time looking at data like, SI, suicidal ideation, and things along those lines, but on a relative basis, those numbers are pretty low. And so it's certainly important for us to track and make sure they don't go higher, but how they're measured, how they're collected, the overall numbers tend to be kind of trickier to understand in terms of real general trends, right? And so, being thoughtful about if prevention and kind of those pieces are really important for us, what those actual metrics are. And that's probably where the research piece comes in of like, where do you actually find the things that encourage thriving and flourishing, you know, and what the numbers actually look like. Um, you know, I think that's where it could get interesting, but again, it's probably about a broader group than this.
Russ, what are your thoughts on what a process might look like that we could be involved with? Again, we're not trying to stir up hackles like, our little commission has got to keep our humble humility intact here because a lot of people have opinions on this stuff. And
Yeah.
uh,
Look, you know, there are really I think, two ways of handling this. Our first paper, I mean, this is really going to be the first paper that we're going to put together as a commission and share a formal paper with the town, including the selectmen and women, as well as town council and Board of Ed's going to see this. Part of me wants to get their attention up front. And the people that I've talked to, and people ask me, what are the healthcare issues you see in town, Russ? And I get asked this quite a bit, and you try not to be flippant on it. But anytime someone sees and I take this in context, right? But if they see the suicidal ideation rate for our adolescents, that is a sobering number for a lot of people that just wakes them up and says, okay, we need to come together collectively and look at something. Um, so I'm torn between having that kind of shock and awe and getting their attention right up front, to providing a paper that is warm and fuzzy and feel good of, here's some great things and concepts that we need to do that we can share, but does not draw us attention to an action plan, if you will. So I'm really kind of torn between those, and that's why I'd love to hear everyone's opinion on it. Um, my first coming out the gate is, how do we get their attention? There's enough things happening in domestic violence. There's enough things happening in suicidal ideation rates and actual suicides that have occurred over the last couple of years, that to get someone's attention and say, we have these tracking mechanisms and we're looking at these numbers. I find that we as a community, and I think even as a nation, really, we become too reactionary. We hear certain specifics and then everybody is running towards that. We have a suicide attempt, or we have an actual suicide in town, and now everyone is focusing on that, and all the narrative is heading on that. When I think if we talk about the rising waters and rising all ships in a healthy community, it has to be social isolation, which we talked about, which can be for adolescents and adults. It has to be a healthy lifestyle, living, and other things. And I think we can put it in those kind of pockets, and then be able to, once we get the attention, I think then make it into actionable steps that we can all agree upon, that here are the 3 or 4 things that fall within our scope, um, as being a health commission. If that made any sense at all.
No, that made a ton of sense, and especially what you started with the back and forth between the two styles. And I feel the same. And but I feel like I just continue. The hardest thing for me about articulating any of this is that I still am not that clear on what our scope is. Right. And so, some of my not knowing about the tone to take is not knowing, like, how do the selectmen view our role? And what are they looking for from us? Because I think, when you don't know that, you can inadvertently come in and sort of have a miscommunication already, because we're thinking, well, we want to be doing these things, and I don't know if they want us to be doing those things or see that as our role. So I feel bad we're this far into the discussion, but I do feel like I keep coming back to it. Like, I'm just not clear what the town views the role of the Health and Human Services Commission to be. Do you
Yeah.
guys feel like you have a better idea, or,
Well, there, Jen, I mean, you're 100% correct. I mean, I always start, and I even put this in my little comment section to Peter and last night. And I'm sorry, Peter, just Monday in healthcare is always a crazy day, but it's just starting with our charter statement, right? This is the charter that we've been given, and the charter is, as I recall, and Peter and Raquel, correct me if I'm off here, it is to make recommendations to the selectmen on health issues that need to be addressed in town in consideration of what's going on in the state and their priorities. And it is to make those recommendations, period. I
but
do
like,
not, yeah.
but like recommending, we think you should do these things, or we just think this should be on your radar. Like, I'm just, because I feel like we've done a really good job of identifying, and we've really distilled a lot of, diverse groups and diverse issues, and we've distilled them into some, clear ideas of areas to focus on. And it's that next step of, so then what do you do with that? Is where I think we keep stumbling. And I feel like for me, I don't have great ideas because I'm just not totally clear on what, I mean, I hear the charter that you said, I totally hear that. And it sounds, I always think, oh yeah, great, that's what we're supposed to do. But then when you really dial down on, well, what does that look like and what does that mean? I'm just not sure. I feel like we can bring up ideas with people, but if they, oftentimes they're sort of not necessarily appreciated, you know? Like, we've been talking about the suicide ideation and all of these things for a while, and getting a lot of that's not an issue here. And then boom, we have 4 suicides in a year, you know? And so it's like, oh, well, that didn't seem to work right. So is that, I don't really know where to go from there, you know? I think
Um,
isolation is a huge one. It's like that. It's like the suicide ideation, where it's everybody sees that it's an issue, or they've heard about it, but that's sort of what does it look like to get going on having an action plan around it, is where I'm not that clear.
Yeah, and the reality is we have no staff, us. We don't have anybody reporting to us. And what I don't want us to be is a scold saying, do this, do this, do this, do that. And then we're just from the peanut gallery. And I think, and these are very real issues. There's no right or wrong answer to these questions. I think what we're my own sense is to provide a really good synthesis of the thinking of smart people in town of what things we need to be focusing on are, and bringing up some new things that are not in the dialogue yet.
Mhm.
Like AI is not thought about in any real way. I mean, I think, and Russ, I added you the stuff about the state funding in there because that is not well known to everybody at this point. And then the gathering kind of ideas. Um, so that to me is the real, the real tension, because if we had a staff, it'd be a whole different thing. Like here, it's like we're going, hey, we've got our recommendations, and if you approve, we'll go do it. And that's not us. And then, you run into, Marcy and Jen, how Jen reacted when she got opinions from us. So I'm very sensitive to that. And
Mhm.
I think it's going to evolve. I think I'd love to keep it this general given where we are in the cycle and everything, this general tone, um, and a bit of a focus on metrics, I think there's something that we can build in and with just a line in there on that. Um, but recommendations, I just don't think we're, frankly, we're qualified. I mean, Russ, you can probably come up with some given your sort of expertise in area about like real actions. I think we're supposed to, a big part of the charter, stay knowledgeable of the needs and conditions of the health and general welfare of the citizens of the town of New Canaan, as well as in the services provided. And this is our best judgment, I think, on the things that probably matter most.
Yeah,
Uh,
I just brought up, I think it's an excellent point, Peter. I just brought up there, I mean, that's what I had. Can everybody see that or,
Yeah.
yeah?
So, I mean, what about as sort of like a more of a watchdog and advocacy point of view? If some of the more specifics are that we've identified areas that we should focus on as a community, and then sort of assessing who in our community is addressing those things or working to address those things, people who do have staff and do provide services. And then do we see any areas where that's lacking? And that we bring that to everyone's attention, and that we, could even seek out other organizations in the area that maybe could be providing more of that. I mean, maybe that fits into, a safe area of our role. It's almost like an advocacy thing.
I'm struggling with, and I think what I'm hearing Peter say, and I don't disagree with him, is what our charter is versus what our history has been, right? And I think our history has been to have very intelligent people sit around the table, listen to the Health and Human Services Department talk about their issues, and then make recommendations, but soft recommendations on our thoughts. And Peter's correct. You do have at times directors who have very strong opinions, and in their mind may not feel that they report to the commission at all, that they report either to the state or to the selectmen. But when I look at powers and duties, and I personally, in all the years I've been on Health and Human Services, I don't think we've executed upon these. I think we have been the soft generalist, raise our hand and red flags here. But this goes into an annual report. This goes into prepare a budget section, which to me, and I'm very sensitive to what Peter is saying here. We have not used the strength of our charter, if you will, to maybe to the degree that we can have influence on budgetary numbers and putting a budget together that has KPIs that says, here's our recommendation, whether they accept it or not, just like in the Board of Ed making recommendations to the Board of Finance. At least we're on record as having a cohesive, cogent argument and discussion on this is what we're seeing and the recommendations we're having. But there's quite a bit of detail in this, in our charter, that until now, I don't think, my personal belief is, we've really not executed upon that. And I'm not saying that we go from a 1 to a 10, and here we are with the full policy recommendations and budgetary and all of those. I think, to Peter's point, I think this has to evolve over time, so that we don't get the pushback and we don't get people who are threatened in any level. But so that goes back to Jen, I think, where I was beginning with is, this is very specific and I don't think we can get there. I don't think we can get there now. I think we have to start in with a more general basis, but um, there's a lot in here that I see anywhere.
Have we
Um,
been submitting an annual report to the selectmen? Is that something just the chair has been doing on their own, or did we sort of just stop doing that?
I've not seen any recommendations at all in all of my years that came from the commission to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
I've seen each department head, Health and Human Services, having their budgets and them
Yep.
making recommendations to us, but nothing to that level of detail like and I use the Board of Ed because that's the largest budget in town and they get
Yeah.
typically the most attention. But
But if this is just, separate from the Human Services and the Health Department doing their budget and their reporting, but this seems to be talking about kind of what we've been trying to do, which is, to submit a document that says, here's what we're seeing, here's what we're thinking. This annual report, it says down here that's due February 1st every year.
yep.
So that, I mean, that helps me a little bit just in terms of, as a document, even what Peter has come up with or the group has been looking at, even to say we would like to get back on track with this and make sure that someone is saying to at least the Board of Selectmen, if not town council and everybody, here's what we're seeing. And that includes those metrics, like we're seeing an increase in this or a decrease in that, and sort of put them in those terms.
I mean, honestly, I think the selectmen and the town council need to have that view that that's what they want.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure about that, not to mention the other constituencies. And then you run right into the Health and Human Services departments.
Yeah,
Because the kicker here is there's no staff, and the people who are actually doing all of this, we have got oversight. And it's very weak oversight. I mean, there's no reporting requirements and no assessments that we do, and we're not asked to do that. It's very clear what the reporting lines are. And that puts us into this sort of advisory position. And, it's not like we can go wave this around in the selectmen's face and town council's face saying, this is what we're gonna do. Look at the charter. That's not how the world works.
I guess
But
that's what I
then
was
this
saying, if this could be like an entree to it, saying we've gone through our charter and seen that, the charter
Yeah.
states we should be doing this annual report and we'd like to get back in the habit of doing that and sort of address it. That's what I mean. Like, instead of just showing up with something and being like, here, it's a little
Mhm.
bit of here's why we're doing it and what we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, this is a big Barb discussion because she's the
Yeah,
one
it's
who's,
true. Yeah,
and we're getting into the role thing that
yeah.
I've been struggling with forever. I know Russ, before I was around, you were struggling with
I
forever.
know.
Like, what are we
I think we
doing?
all do. Yeah.
And it's a real issue. And I'm just wondering, I mean, this is super helpful discussion. I think evolving to that makes a bunch of sense. But what should we do like now with this
Yeah.
doc? Because this document puts it out there a little bit. I mean, we're bringing some issues that are not, last one, was kind of the four major areas where we had to cover. And I'm not saying they're
Yep.
obvious. Those are the main things. There's real opinions and points of view in here, in how we're doing on the core. And, those could ruffle a couple of feathers. We're definitely, the data point, around youth, there's we're raising them. I know it's done gently, but the real issues that we're bothered by the most are in here. And but I worry about specificity because I know I am not qualified.
maybe the way to do it, maybe the way to thread the needle is maybe this is an addendum to the report. It's you could print it in one page, and maybe the opening line is in consistent with our charter, we are looking towards producing an annual report that highlights priorities that we're seeing. Just take some soft language out of here, and moving towards an annual report in February, and that's when Barb will have to come in as chair and make that determination. But maybe we can, the opening paragraph can be this soft, and addendum A has our charter, and we're just soft so that knowing, and this is being recorded, of course, but knowing our first selectmen, they may not know the full extent of the charter because they have been focused and pulled on other things, and maybe they haven't read the full, and they just know what has happened the year before and the year before that, and kind of, back in the day where we were given X amount of grant money, and we just decided where those dollars
Yeah.
were being spent, and as compared to really having in a position, um, which can be very general and non-threatening, and acknowledging that there are a lot of community, private, public partnerships that are occurring. But these are the 3 or 4 things that we see it requiring attention, requiring priority, and keep it that soft, Peter, to your point. Um, but just open it up to the charter, and then having the charter as an appendix as page 3, just as an
Yeah.
attachment. So
I think that works, and honestly, this has got to be carefully socialized with the selectmen and the staff.
yeah,
Mhm.
Most
100%.
probably most importantly, because otherwise this could be very disempowering.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like us strutting around and then we go all back to our day job.
Right.
Yeah, but it's such a great time. I mean, not as much with Marcy, but she is on the newer side, and then having a new health director and really be careful about presenting it as we are looking to see what, to clarify what our role is, and we want to hear from you. How can we be helpful to you? You know, and really the way you communicate that so that it isn't ever we're trying to execute stronger power over your day-to-day job, because I don't think
Right.
that's what we are trying to do.
No.
But just to say, we don't want to be a bunch of empty suits that sit around once a month and you have to, spend time preparing numbers for us for no reason at all, you know? Um, and sort of present it that way. I feel like it's good timing with the staff, because it's not, someone who's like, I've been doing this for 15 years and you're trying to shake things up,
Yeah.
I mean, I do think our quote superpower as a group is sifting through a lot of presentations made to us, the data we get every month, our outside lives, because all of us have game in this area, significant game, very different. And us synthesizing all of this is unique. That is the superpower. It's not executing and I mean running around and figure out what what Lauren is doing and stuff like that. You know, that's why leaning in. This is why this group is particular as our little subcommittee. I know is really great on this stuff, and I think collectively we sort of captured that. And I think Russ, I'm okay with your notion of highlighting the charter a little bit more upfront and then having it as an addendum toward the end. I worry that the addendum is a little bit of a slight barbed, thing. Oh, by the way,
Well,
this is
can we
why
explain it?
I think the conversation of like, Barb talking to Deanna and head of town council, like, okay, that's the way to do it is I think, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud because I love the way Russ, you're pressing in particular is, walk in with our document, with the charter and say, hey, what else would be helpful to you? This is the way we've done in the past. We haven't done much. Would you want a little bit more detail on these things and what would be really useful?
Mhm.
Go to the head of town council with the same thing, and that way we get our answer from our real true clients, if you think about it.
Exactly. But having the charter somewhere,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just, Russ was saying, if nobody's read it, because who has time to read all the charters of every, group in town to kind of get it, like, speaking the same language. But yeah, saying, so here we looked at our charter and it's saying this, does that still feel helpful to you? It seems like we've gotten away from this. Would it be helpful to get back to it?
Right.
You do it exactly in a much more, we're just trying to be a useful body in town,
Yeah.
I would add one footnote, Jen, and I'm agreeing with everything everyone is saying here. I think it's the right approach. Um, I will revert us back to what happened 2 years ago, if you recall, with Bethany and the team, and going to the Board of Finance and not having our ducks in a row and not having all the supporting information and documentation that we needed. And if you recall, for those of you that are on the commission, all this press, all of the community getting involved, uproar on cuts that were occurring and all of this. And we just didn't, I felt anyway, didn't have enough documentation to support the needs and the requests, the financial requests that were coming out of the two committees or the two departments, Health and Human Services, that we have oversight on. And if you recall that, it was a little awkward. And I'd like to prevent that from occurring in the future by really having supportive documentation behind the budget. Because as we talk about, as Deanna sits down and looks at the budget for next year, it's going to start getting tight in some places, and we need to make sure that we have at least um, had a position paper that goes in and justifies and for the need of X amount of funding for the departments and for our cause and our role. That always plays in the back of my mind is when we go to the Board of Finance, it's just an easy, you know, line strike item out of the budget because we don't have that supportive documentation.
Yeah, I agree. We need to, all of that is so important. And, but I still also think we need to kind of have both types of documents.
Agreed.
One that's like used, like you're saying, to say, hey, we're down to the nitty gritty. This is why this is important. And one that's more like reintroducing us to town council and the selectmen, because there are going to be people who just don't go into the weeds like that. And so to also have the document that just says, hey, here's who we are. This is what we're focused on. These are the areas we've identified as important to our community right now, right? And kind of, it's like having two twin documents, right? You've got both, depending on the situation. I think the next step is we do need to have like the more, like you're saying, the more data focused information would be the next thing to develop.
I agree, but the fly in the ointment is the reporting structure, though, because we're not going to be preparing the budgets. That's not our job. And if they reported to us, we would do exactly what Russ is saying. Like, okay, you want these things, show why and what do they do, blah, 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 support your budget, that kind of thing. And this is the thing we always struggle with. So are we going to have our own little, and that comes from Deanna's got to be the one directing the team to show up with those supports. And we can be helpful to that, but we can't direct. And that's what I've struggled. I mean, obviously I'm a professional board guy, but the way the boards usually work is you report, they report to the board, and that's not true here.
But Russ, is
And,
what
and
you
I,
just, sorry, go ahead.
I just think we need to be subtle and realistic about that design, because it significantly limits what we can do, but there's still a way to have impact. Absolutely. And I'm not throwing in the towel or anything, but getting all the supporting sort of information. I mean, Russ, I know it doesn't go over well when we ask the staffs for a lot of stuff.
Great.
That's blown back on us several times.
Agreed.
But what Russ has highlighted here, is this talking about, I don't think this is talking about the health department and the health human services department budgets. I think this is more like our little budget that we were shooting grants out of.
But that's,
Because
but
we
I,
don't have any sway or say over really, I mean, as Peter has said, like, they don't report to us. They have their budget from the town that's their own budget. Right? And that has to
Does-
take into account state stuff and all of those things. But
right.
our budget, our grants, I think is what this is talking about, right?
I think
But
that
I don't see anything in the charter that says we are to prepare a list of grants, and so I guess that's recommendations, but this has always come from the staffs, and that might not be the right thing. And yes, we're supposed to weigh in. I think it's super gray right now.
I don't disagree with you because, whatever has happened in the past becomes policy in
Right.
effect, right? And I don't want to keep putting things back on our chair, but I think this is a discussion with Deanna because
Right.
it is gray. You can read into this annual appropriations. You can read into this request shall contain a statement of possible addition alternative funding, which considers federal and state government grants and private sources. There you're talking about staff involvement and staff actually putting them together and writing them and developing them, which is controlling their workload in
Yep.
essence, which we've all experienced pushback when we've ever attempted to add to that or take away from that when we're seen as more of an advisory um, commission as compared to a chartered commission with a actual detailed requirement and authority, maybe
Yeah.
for lack of a better term.
if I could just make one comment, to me it seems like in a lot of ways there's three different buckets, right? There's Health and Human Services with Marcy and Jackie, and they really should be watching out for the safety net of our town, right? Then there's the Public Health Department, which takes care of a lot of the nitty-gritty, the data, the vaccines, the permits, the that piece. And then there's the overarching trends, prevention, thriving that we've been talking about, the social isolation, the populations that may be at risk but aren't being caught by Health and Human Services, right? And so in my mind, I'm almost sitting there saying, who's in charge of that third bucket? Is that
That's,
us?
I think that's us. And I even read that what we were just looking at financially as much more like when you're talking state and federal grants, it's like Raquel and me saying, we really feel like we need to address this issue. So we're going to apply for this grant. It's kind of like what Jim Lisher often does. He says, I see this issue, and he goes off and he tries to get his own funding and get things going. That's how I read that, just based off of, and granted, it's very limited, but just based off of my limited experience with our commission. I just cannot see a world in which our commission would be overseeing the health department's state and federal grants. I feel like we're so distanced from that. That's very particular and requires a particular knowledge and background in education. However, looking like you're saying, this third bucket with kind of what are trends and these different things, that I do think is really clearly under our purview. And it's sort of figuring out what that looks like.
And it's almost delineating that, right? Because then we don't come across as trying to step on toes. We're saying, you're caring for this bucket. We're not trying to add to that. You're caring for this bucket. We need to hear about those things because it informs our third bucket that we need to be overseeing. Now, the question is do we have the capability to actually manage that third bucket? Or is that where our recommendations come in and say, hey, in this third bucket, this is where we're seeing trends. We understand suicidal ideation is up, but that's actually our safety net, and that needs to be addressed by the safety net. And so we've got this third bucket that we really feel here are the emerging issues in, and that's, I don't know if describing it that way is helpful and then kind of pulls us away from that um trying to tell people about their jobs that we're not necessarily informed on.
Yeah, it's a tricky though, because it's a continuum between the stuff that the third bucket and the first two buckets at some point, because this is very relevant to Marcy. Everything we're talking about, it's not something she
Mm.
can spend a lot of time on because she's in service mode
Right.
all
Which
the
is why
time.
she's also been the one to create the budget for us, right? Like, hasn't she been the
Right.
one to kind of delineate that? And that's fallen on her. So whenever we come up with ideas, that's when I feel like she gets overwhelmed because she does have a lot on her plate.
Yeah, yeah. I listen, we're working within a charter that is highly imperfect, right? And we're working with an overall structure that is imperfect because there's nothing addressing these longer term things. But this is where leaders, and this is where it goes to the actual town government, because the stuff that
And,
we've talked about thriving and stuff, that's a first select person speech.
and so maybe that's a piece of what we've understood and noticed over time is that there's no mechanism in place.
But this is why I think it's very important to have a separate conversation with the leaders. Because I think your framework is fantastic, Raquel. It really is. But lobbing that in to this sort of document,
Right.
it
Right.
just it's so it's begging for a roundtable, open, confidential discussion amongst the key folks, which is why I'm trying to edge away from that and try to create a different forum with a couple of folks who are there to support town council and Deanna. Like, we're not trying to, wrap knuckles or, anything like that. I think that's the way to go where we want to go. Um, and see if they're interested, because they're
Well, we have usually one or two town council representatives, right, that are supposed to be the liaison, and then we've got the selectmen, and it feels like maybe it is about, Barb and, I mean, whoever, whatever the group makeup is, but like, the appropriate people having a little bit of a roundtable, like you said, so that it is not a we're doing this presentation. It's a here's some thoughts, and get some feedback, because I just don't know how much we can do beyond this document. When we don't really know what people want us to be doing, what's going to be taken positively. When I say what people want us to do, what are they going to say? Oh, that's great. That's what I want. That's helpful.
yeah.
I'll just add this in the interest of time. I think this has been a great conversation. I think, Peter, I think we can all collaborate a little bit on helping frame it a little bit. Those private discussions need to take place for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing this out to be shot down, or be shot at least. If you had a Hugo Alves as the chairman of the Board of Ed to come to one of our meetings, talk about health issues that they're concerned about in the children in schools, or you have a Brian Lutzy come and present and talk about what he's seeing and issues, and then we're making it more collaborative as an open discussion as compared to
Yeah.
that we're just going in and, trying to put our stake in the ground and say everything needs to come through us and we need to be the arbiter of
Yeah.
all of the data. That here's a non-threatening way or non-judgmental way of saying that we're all or sharing together in a healthy community and having an open dialogue on what's happening with our children. So it doesn't get siloed, it doesn't get pushed down when we see things boiling up. And that we can have an open discussion on them, and I think a healthy discussion as compared to, it's falling only within this group who may or may not be giving it the weight that it needs to have. So I'm just looking at other ways of doing it.
Russ, I think the power of our meetings is real, and this is why it's so important we change the time and to get away from the darned, the lunch, the coffee. Because that's a way to influence and be collaborative. I like that a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense because listen, it's going to be soft influence that works here. We've got no stick. And we don't have ability to real thumbs up and thumbs down like P and Z does,
But I
and I
think,
think
oh, sorry, Peter, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I really do love that idea, Russ, because then even you can almost go through the emerging issues and bring someone in to kind of help us solidify, what we think we're seeing,
Yeah.
right? And kind of give it that added, like this isn't just opinion between the, 9 of us or however I don't even know how many there are of us. But that idea of we've gone through and spoken to invested people.
So how about this? Are people okay with me adding something, referencing the charter right at the beginning explicitly? It's kind of there, but it doesn't say the word charter, and I think adding the word charter matters. Doing that, um, and then, we talked to Barb, we talked to the overall commission about, so this would sort of be the document, something about metrics at the end, underlining that in some way. I think that can be highlighted effectively. Those 2 points are the ones I'd pull out. But the real work is the separate conversations and the use of our meetings to migrate our influence and value add. And then hopefully we have a very different discussion next year. Because one thing I do know is that kind of town governments evolve, and that's the way we should be. We're not looking to do anything revolutionary. And I think there's progress already. We're weighing in on stuff and we migrate this. And I think, Raquel, I think your basic framework is such an interesting point, especially when we talk to the leaders about, hey, this is our observation, because that's really insightful and really important, and that's something you can play with in these discussions and then see where they want to go. And
Mhm.
so I know this is a slightly inconclusive conclusion to the meeting, but I think it probably is realistic given kind of where we are. We have the whole commission, next week. We can tease this out, and I think we can have a good long discussion with Barb, with the subcommittee maybe, or I can do it. I mean, because or we all can. Everybody can weigh in and figure out how we make this our plan for the next year.
I think we, between us four, I think we have a really good consensus on where we want to go. I mean, we're between the blue lines, to use
Yeah.
a hockey term. I think, um, which gives us enough flexibility to be able to modify and move a little bit. But um, bringing some key people into our meetings, I think maybe is a good way
Yeah.
to break the ice a little bit and collaborate on just discussions without feeling like we're taking our charter and, nailing it on the front door and saying, everything has to come through us.
Yeah. I think that's great. Any other summary comments? I'll try to redo a draft a tiny bit for everybody. And then if everybody could write back to me going, yeah, we're, thumbs up, let's present this as written next week, that would be great. And I'll catch Barb up a little bit and see if she has some ideas about how and when we can have this discussion. Definitely, certainly with her to start. And we could have a subset of this group kind of chat with her, because I wouldn't, the richness of the discussion, I wouldn't want to do that just by myself. I mean, I kind of can, but your other voices are important here. Um, and then we get this done, in the full committee thing. I'm not sure we should have the discussion we just had in front of the whole gang. I mean, yeah, but I don't know. I mean,
I
that
think it would take hours.
no,
But he
exactly.
had so many thoughts, you
No,
know?
no, no. You're exactly right. So I think that's going to be Barb's call anyway, appropriately so. But so is that okay to wrap on that basis?
Yeah.
And boy, just thanks everybody. You guys are such good collaborators and open um, and real, and actually putting real stuff out there, but doing it in a really great spirit. Um, I'm really grateful. You guys have really put time into it and great thought. So it's been really fun.
Thanks for doing all the writing. I feel like that's
Yeah.
the stuff that takes forever, winnowing it down.
But honestly, it's the ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ideas, you guys can see everywhere. Your stuff is everywhere in here. And I think it's a really good, for what it is, right? For what it is, it works pretty well. It's a really nice work product from everybody. All right, guys. Well, we'll see you all next week, and just keep an eye out. I'll try to get this done today, and then I'll catch Barb up initially. And if anybody wants to go to her directly, please do. Um, with your own slant on this stuff. I'll try to summarize, when I talk to her. But each of you have really rich and different perspectives on this. But Russ is right. I think we've landed in a really neat place in terms of forward action. So, all right, guys, enjoy the
right.
beautiful, beautiful day.
Nice
It
to
is
see you.
gorgeous
Thanks,
out.
everybody.
Yeah.
See you guys soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.